Hello, good morning to you, Andrew. Well, we would have to find a way of connecting to Andrew and take his views on what has happened with the Black Stars. In fact, we're discussing this morning because this morning the discussion we're having concerns two matches. In two matches, we did the same things. In the match against Egypt, we're winning. Then the same melted down. In this match, same issue. In fact, in this match too, we even got two clean penalties. Two clear clean penalties. Yes, we still lost. We didn't lose. We didn't lose. We drew 2-2. We needed to have won this match to give ourselves a chance of qualifying to the next stage of the African Cup, currently ongoing in Cote d'Ivoire. Andrew, thank you very much for your time and good morning to you.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Andrew Olsson is an African football expert, and this morning we in Ghana are trying to make sense of what happened yesterday. First, let me ask your own views of Ghana's performance at the African Cup so far.
Well, yeah, I can completely understand what Ghanaians are going through right now. First off, let me extend my condolences. It's very disappointing way to end the competition. My impression from the tournament is that, when it comes to Ghana's performance, it was unconvincing throughout the entire group stage. Even during the match yesterday, despite having a 2-0 lead, the performance was not entirely very good from the Black Stars. They were outpossessed throughout the competition in all three of their matches. And generally, it was a struggle that we've seen in recent months. It continued for Chris Hughton's side, just building attacks, keeping possession, and but yeah, in the end, a very tragic way to go out of the tournament.
Okay, so two things you're saying. You're saying it's a tragic way to go out of the tournament, but you also say Ghana has been unconvincing. So, in one breath, the suggestion is that it was what was going to happen anyway. But you're saying it's a tragic way to go out of the tournament. How is it tragic when we got exactly what we're playing for?
Well, that's a good point. But, I would say in many ways, the Black Stars, they did what they could to get the result. They did things right. They defended well generally, and they took advantage of their opportunities, which is, a lot of what football is in the end generally. But I think, any Black Star supporter who watched that match, there were just long stretches where Ghana really struggled to control the ball, where Mozambique, a team that's considered, middle of the tier, middle of the pack in African football, outplayed them. Particularly in the midfield, especially in the midfield. That's where I would focus on. So, yeah, I'd say it's tragic because Ghana put themselves in a good spot despite looking unconvincing. But, yeah, like you said, in the end, I would say, Ghanaian supporters wouldn't have been very confident moving forward, even if they progressed to the round of 16.
And let's talk about the round of 16. Do we still have a chance?
No. I think mathematically it's impossible at this point for Ghana to qualify.
Well, and then now let's go about, because you said that watching the Black Stars over the past few months has been a struggle under Chris Hughton. What do you think the challenge is?
Well, I think one thing about this team is I struggled to kind of see the identity of this team. I think Ghana consistently struggled to really control the ball, to really have a cohesive game plan when it came to the attack. I think this team defends very well, generally. I think they struggled with the defense in this competition, but that was one of the things where I think Ghana really showed that they were, towards the top when it comes to Africa. But when it comes to some sort of cohesive attacking plan and, particularly in the midfield, basic things like keeping the ball, keeping possession, transitioning from the midfield to the attack, I think Ghana can, continuously struggled to have a real identity. in this department, and I think that's what really cost them in this competition in the end.
The things you mentioned, you talk about identity, you talk about cohesive attacking plan, keeping the ball, transition. These are all technical issues. Do those speak to the failure of the team or the quality of the players available to him?
Well, it's something. This is a good question. It's something I've been kind of debating in my head. I think Ghana has the talent. They should be in the knockout stages. If you look at the talent in the squad, where these players are playing their club football. But, there's just kind of something that was fundamentally wrong. I think this team really lacked sort of chemistry compared to some of their peers in Africa. And I think, when it comes to when we've been watching this team, just sort of the strategy that's been used, the strategies that have been implemented, I think when you struggle to kind of have cohesion and chemistry, particularly in the attack, I think you're really at a disadvantage compared to some of these African teams who've had coaches who've been there for a while, for several years, who've had the same group of players. Things keep on changing with Ghana, I feel like. There are a couple constants, but I just think this team really lacked chemistry compared to some of their African peers, and I think that really comes out in a competition like this.
And who do you put that to? Because there are those who are blaming the technical team that we have currently. Because a lot of Ghanaians were surprised when in our first match, the defensive pairing was Salisu and Jiku, because they hadn't seen them play for a long time. And they were even surprised when Ofori was in goal, among others. You talk about things keep on changing. There were some constants. Maybe a constant will be Gideon Mensah. You are looking at Odoi, and of course in defensive midfield you still have Samet there, and Jordan is playing, of course. But these things, should they be put down to the coach's own failures?
Well, in the end, you can't blame you can blame the players, but the coach is always going to take the blame. I think, like you mentioned with the central defensive pairing, I was pretty convinced we were going to see Daniel Amarte starting in the center of defense with Jiku. I'm just really kind of surprised at how it turned out. I think Hughton, he made some decisions, like playing Majid Ashimeru, playing, Salisu and Jiku together. The first match, he really changed things up a lot. Bringing in Königsdorfer, bringing in Panso. I appreciated that he kind of tried to make some changes to the lineups to try and spark something, but in the end, I really think, when you compare them to teams like Mozambique, who've had the same coach for several years, he's built a good group of players with good chemistry. I think these sorts of things lead to this sort of disjointed, disorganized appearance that we saw from Ghana, particularly things like keeping the ball, keeping possession. They were thoroughly outpossessed in all three matches, and I think you can really chalk a lot of that up to chemistry and things like that, and some things that are genuinely out of Chris Hughton's hands. However, in the end, he is going to take the blame, and that's the reality in football, is that you can't sack all of the players. You can only sack the coach, and that's what we're probably going to see here with Chris Hughton.
But if you were to advise, because already in Ghana that's a discussion. In fact, people even want the team to be thrown away. They don't want to see. They're just picking a few players from the team, and they want the rest of the team, the rest of them not to be called up in the first, but the whole technical team to go, the management team to go. But based on what you've been seeing Ghana do over the years, is that a good idea, considering you're saying places like Mozambique, Cape Verde have had the same thing for a long time? Is it a good idea to disband this, or to just continue and see where this takes us? What should we do? What do you think we should do?
That's an excellent question. As an American, I support the United States national team, and we failed to qualify for the World Cup in 2018. And we decided to axe the veterans. We had some good young players, and we decided to build a core around that young group. And I think that's what Ghana needs to do. That's something I've been advocating. I've kind of been questioning the continued selections of the IUs. Jordan played pretty well, I must say. I think he was probably the best attacker for the Black Stars. But, I think the best thing for Ghana at this point is they have some really good young talented players. And I think if Ghana, wants to build that chemistry like we've been discussing here, they need to identify a core of young players who they want to build this team around. Because I don't think there's any question that the Black Stars have been on the decline steadily over the last few years. The results have gotten worse and worse. The team has looked less and less convincing. And I think that's really the best thing that Ghana can do right now, the Black Stars can do, is to identify a young core, players like Ernest Nuama, Salis Abdul Samed. There's some really talented young players who I think can compete at a high level and succeed at the World Cup, at major competitions for Ghana. The best thing the Black Stars can do is identify a coach who they can stay with for several years, who can build up that chemistry with the players, and then identify the young players who by all means are certainly there for Ghana. We see young Ghanaians thriving in Europe. And then I think to build that chemistry needs to be the number one mission for the Black Stars, and to keep keep stability in the coaching, so that they can, because we see with some of these African teams, Equatorial Guinea, countries like that who are small countries, but they're thriving because these coaches have been there for multiple years and have built this chemistry with their player pool. And I think that's what Ghana needs to focus on, because there's been too many coaches. There's been too much changing of players, bringing in dual national players, things like that. Ghana needs to have a plan. They need to identify young players, identify a coach who will be willing to stick around, maybe absorb some difficult results, and then that can lead to success, like we've seen with the United States national team.
Can that coach be Chris Hughton?
It's really, whether the coach wants to be a part of that mission. That's the most important thing. Personally, for me, I think Hughton kind of ran out of ideas with this squad. I really liked the passion he had for this job. He has, of course, familial ties to Ghana. I think he really took this on as a sort of passion project. But it was his first national team job, and it's an entirely different thing managing a national team from a club team, from that day-to-day sort of interaction you have with players. I like the passion he had for this job, but I don't know if he's I don't know if he's the right person that can be that person to stay around for a while and build that team.
And I realize you're moving from I don't think to I don't know. You're trying to avoid.
Yeah. Like Ghanaians, I'm trying to figure it out myself,
But let me conclude then by asking you this question. Now, Cape Verde, fantastic performance so far. But teams that we expect to be doing well, Cameroon may be on their way out. Ivory Coast, even the hosts are in trouble. The traditional powers have been struggling in this tournament. Maybe Nigeria has picked up quite well. Who are your early favorites to win this cup, or is it difficult to tell?
Well, after all this discussion about team chemistry, stability, I think Senegal are looking very good. This team, Aliou Cisse, he knows his team so well. We know it's very difficult to win back-to-back Africa Cup of Nations, but I think if there's any team that can do it, I think it's Senegal, because the North African nations are really struggling. I think they're having difficulties with the heat of West Africa, that heat and the humidity. And so that leaves, for me, Senegal as the favorites at the moment.
Andrew, thank you very much for speaking to us.
It was a pleasure to have this discussion. Thank you for having me.
Andrew Olsson is African football expert, joining us all the way from the US and having a conversation on everything I did.